Good morning, dear students. I am Sanju Hazdia, Assistant Professor of English at Government College Ratangad. Today we will study Spring and Fall poem by G.M. Hopkins, and this is introductory part. This poem is included in BA Part 3rd, Paper 1st by Maharaja Ganga Singh University, Bikaner. So in this introductory part, I will give introduction of the poem, introduction of the poet and summary of the poem. So first of all, introduction of the poet. As you know, poet is G.M. Hopkins. So introduction of G.M. Hopkins. The full name of G.M. Hopkins is Gerard Manley Hopkins. Gerard Manley Hopkins was born on 28th July 1844 at Stratford, Essex, and he died on 8th June 1889 in Dublin. He was English poet and Jesuit priest, one of the most individual of Victorian writers. So he was prominent Victorian writer. His work was not published in collected form until 1918, but it influenced many leading 20th century poets. Hopkins was the eldest of the 9 children of Manley Hopkins, an Anglican who had been British Consul General in Hawaii and had himself published verse. Hopkins won the Poetry Prize at the Highgate Grammar School and in 1863 was awarded a grant to study at Balliol College, Oxford, where he continued writing poetry while studying classics. In 1866, in the prevailing, which renewed interest in the relationship between Anglicanism and Roman Catholicism, he was received into the Roman Catholic Church by John Henry, later known as Cardinal Newman. The following year, he left Oxford with such a distinguished academic record that Benjamin Jowett, then a Balliol lecturer and later master of the college, called him the Star of Balliol. So, G.M. Hopkins was also called the Star of Balliol by Benjamin Jowett. Hopkins decided to become a priest. He entered the Jesuit novitiate in 1868 and burned his youthful verses, determining to write no more as not belonging to my profession. So he decided that he will not write any verse because it does not belong to his profession. Until 1875, however, he kept a journal recording his vivid responses to nature as well as his expression of a philosophy for which he later found support in Duns Scotus, the medieval Franciscan thinker. Hopkins' philosophy emphasized the individuality of every natural thing, which he called inscape. To Hopkins, each sensuous impression had its own elusive selfness. Each scene was to him was a sweet, special scene. In 1874, Hopkins went to St. Bruno's College in North Wales to study theology. There he learned Welsh, and under the impact of the language itself as well as that of the poetry and encouraged by his superior, he began to write poetry again. Moved by the death of 5 Franciscan nuns in Shipwreck in 1875, he broke his 7-year silence to write the long poem, The Wreck of the Diocesan, in which he succeeded in realizing the echo of a new rhythm. So he moved to write by the Franciscan nuns of Shipwreck. That had long been haunting his ear. It was rejected, however, by the Jesuit magazine The Month. He also wrote a series of sonnets, strikingly original in their richness of language and use of rhythm, including the remarkable The Windhover, one of the most frequently analyzed poems in the language. He continued to write poetry, but it was read only in manuscript by his friends, so it was not published by him and fellow poets. Robert Bridges, later poet laureate, Coventry Petmore, and the Reverend Richard Watson Dixon Their appreciation of the strangeness of the poems for the times was imperfect, but they were nevertheless encouraging. Ordained to the priesthood in 1877. So he was ordained priesthood in 1877. Hopkins served as missioner, occasional preacher, and parish priest in various Jesuit churches and institutions in London, Oxford, Liverpool, and Glasgow, and taught classics at Stonyhurst College, Lancashire. He was appointed professor of Greek literature at University College Dublin in 1884. But Hopkins was not happy in Ireland. He found the environment in poor health. From 1885, he wrote another series of sonnets, beginning with Carrion Comfort. They show a sense of desolation, produced partly by a sense of spiritual aridity and partly by a feeling of artistic frustration. These poems, known as the Terrible Sonnets, reveal strong tensions between his delight in the sensuous world and his urge to express it, and his equally powerful sense of religious feelings. While in Dublin, Hopkins developed another of his talents, musical composition. The little he composed shows the same daring originality as does his poetry. So, his talent was also in musical compositions, and they were also original like his poems. His skill in drawing too allowed him to illustrate his journal with meticulously observed details of flowers, trees, and waves. His friends continuously urged him to publish his poems, but Hopkins resisted. All that he saw in print in his lifetime were some immature verses and original Latin poems, in which he took particular pleasure. Hopkins died of typhoid fever and was buried in the Glasnevin Cemetery, Dublin. Among his unfinished works was a commentary on the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, founder of the Jesuit order. After Hopkins' death, Robert Bridges began to publish a few of the Jesuits' most mature poems in anthologies, hoping to prepare the way for wider acceptance of his style. By 1918, Bridges, then poet laureate, judged the time opportune for the first collected edition. It appeared but sold slowly. Not until 1930 was a second edition issued. Thereafter, Hopkins' work was recognized as among the most original, powerful, and influential literary accomplishments of his century. It had a marked influence on such leading 20th century poets as T.S. Eliot, Dylan Thomas, W.H. Auden, Stephen Spender, and C.D. Lewis. Hopkins sought a stronger rhetoric of verse. His exploitation of the verbal subtleties and music of English, of the use of echo, alliteration, and repetition, and a highly compressed syntax were all in the interest of projecting deep personal experiences, including his sense of God's mystery, grandeur, and mercy, and his joy in all things counter, original, spare, strange, as he wrote in Pied Beauty. He called the energizing prosodic element of his verse sprung rhythm. So he invented sprung rhythm in his poems, in which each foot may consist of one stressed syllable. So it is sprung rhythm in which each foot may consist of one stressed syllable and any number of unstressed syllables instead of the regular number of syllables used in traditional meter. The result is a muscular verse, flexible, intense, vibrant, and organic that combines accuracy of observation, imaginative daring, deep feeling, and intellectual depth. Hopkins' letters reveal a brilliant critical faculty, scrupulous self-criticism, generous humanity, and strong will. His friends paid tribute to his personal integrity and to his rare chastity of mind. Coventry Petmore wrote of him. So Coventry Petmore wrote about him, about G.M. Hopkins. There was something in all his words and manners which were at once a rebuke and an attraction to all who could only aspire to be like him. So it was the introduction of the poet, and now introduction of the poem. And our today's poem is Spring and Fall. So this is introduction of the poem. Spring and Fall by Gerard Manley Hopkins uses a unique rhyme scheme and the concept of nature's demise as a representation of something much deeper. So it presents much deeper things. In this one stanza work, Hopkins utilizes the reaction of a young girl named Margaret. So in this poem, poet is presenting the reactions of Margaret to express a deep-rooted fear that humans carry throughout their lives, expressly that of their own mortality. So what is the fear? About own mortality. What seems like a simple account of a girl grieving over trees losing their leaves. So girl is grieving over the losing of the leaves of the trees. As summer months lead into the autumn season is eventually noted to have a much greater meaning. That meaning, as Hopkins notes in the final line of the poem, is that Margaret is mourning the passage of her own life even though she is not mature enough to grasp the notion. Spring and Fall, and the full title is Spring and Fall to a Young Child. Poem is by Gerard Manley Hopkins, and this poem is written in 1880 and published posthumously in 1918 in Poems of Gerard Manley Hopkins. The poet likens a little girl's sorrow at the waning of summer to the larger, tragic nature of human life. Set in rhymed couplets, the melancholy poem is a notable example of sprung rhythm, the irregular system of prosody that Hopkins developed. So it was the introduction of the poem, and now summary of the poem, Spring and Fall. The poem opens with a question. So this poem opens with a question to a child. Poet is asking to the child, Margaret, are you grieving over Golden Grove unliving? Golden Grove, a place whose name suggests an idyllic play world, is unliving or losing its leaves as winter approaches. And the child, with her fresh thoughts, cares about the leaves as much as about the things of man. The speaker reflects that age will alter this innocent response and that later whole worlds of forest will lie in leafless disarray, leaf-meal like piecemeal, without arousing Margaret's sympathy. So later when she will grow old, she will not grieve on losing of the leaves by the trees. The child will weep then too, but for a more conscious reason. However, the source of this knowing sadness will be the same as that of her childish grief. For sorrow's springs are the same. That is, thou neither her mouth nor her mind can yet articulate the fact as clearly as her adult self will. Margaret is already mourning over her own mortality. The title of the poem invites us to associate the young girl Margaret in her freshness, innocence, and directness of emotion with the springtime. Hopkins' choice of the American word fall rather than the British autumn is deliberate. It links the idea of autumnal decline or decay with the biblical fall of man from grace. That primordial episode of loss initiated human mortality and suffering. In contrast, the life of a young child, as Hopkins suggests, and as so many poets have before him, particularly the Romantics, approximates the Edenic state of man before the fall. So before the fall, man was living in the Eden garden, in paradise. So Margaret lives in a state of harmony with nature that allows her to relate to her paradisal Golden Grove with the same sympathy she bears for human beings, or put more cynically, for the things of man. Margaret experiences an emotional crisis when confronted with the fact of death and decay that the falling leaves represent. What interests the speaker about her grief is that it represents such a singular and precious phase in the development of a human being's understanding about death and loss. Only because Margaret has already reached a certain level of maturity can she feel sorrow at the onset of autumn? The speaker knows what she does not, namely that as she grows older, she will continue to experience this same grief, but with more self-consciousness about its real meaning. You will weep and know why, and without the same meditating and admittedly endearing sympathy for inanimate objects, nor spare a sigh. The words of Wayne would leave me lie. This outline is perhaps one of the most beautiful in all of Hopkins' work. The word words suggests a devastation and decline that spreads without end, well beyond the bounds of the little golden grove that seems so vast and significant to a child's perception. Loss is basic to the human experience and it is absolute and all consuming. Wainwood carries the suggestion of pallor and sickness in the word wane and also provides a nice description of the fading colors of the earth. So with the time, earth's colors fades and man is mortal and dies with the time. So as winter dormancy approaches, the word leaf meal, which Hopkins coined by analogy with piecemeal, expresses with poignancy the sense of wholesale havoc, destruction, with which the sight of strewn fallen leaves might strike a naive and sensitive mind. In the final and heaviest moment of the poem, Hopkins goes on to identify what this sorrow is that Margaret feels and will, he assures us, continue to feel, although in different ways. The statement in line 11th that sorrow's springs are the same suggests not only that all sorrows have the same source and these sorrows arouse from the mortality of the man, but also that Margaret, who is associated with springtime, represents a stage all people go through in coming to understand mortality and loss. What is so remarkable about this stage is that while the mouth cannot say what the grief is for, nor the mind even articulate it silently, a kind of understanding nevertheless materializes. It is a whisper to the heart, something guessed at by the ghost or spirit. So spirit realizes the mortality of a person, a purely intuitive notion of the fact that all grieving points back to the self, to one's own suffering of losses, and ultimately to one's own mortality. Though the narrator's tone toward the child is tender and sympathetic, he does not try to comfort her, nor are his reflections really addressed to her because they are beyond her level of understanding. We suspect that the poet has at some point gone through the same ruminations that he now observes in Margaret, and that his once intuitive grief then led to these more conscious reflections. Her way of confronting loss is emotional and vague. His is philosophical, poetical, and generalizing, and we see that this is his more mature and colder way of likewise mourning for his own mortality. So this is the summary of the poem. In this poem, the poet is expressing the feelings of Margaret. She is child. She can't understand the mortality of a person, but she is grieving on the fallen leaves. And I will explain this poem in my next video. And I think you understood introduction of the poet, introduction of the poem, and summary of the poem. And thanks for watching this video.